broadcaster Ian Dale with us and economist Miata Fambulla here as well. Now, overnight a vigil has been held for the 21 victims that were killed in the most deadly US school shooting in a decade. Despite Joe Biden's plea for tougher gun control, Donald Trump is preparing to address the National Rifle Association at their conference this week. We're joined now to discuss what's going on from North Carolina, National Rifle Association supporter and pro-gun campaigner Dan Roberts. Good morning to you, Dan. Thank you for joining us.
Good morning. My pleasure.
So we've been talking to one of the aunts of one of the children that lost their lives at the school on the show this morning, and she was saying that she thinks stricter gun controls would have meant that this shooting didn't happen. Stricter gun controls is desperately what you need in America. When you see 19 small children have lost their lives and 2 teachers in the most recent of these massacres, it's hard to argue against that. What are your thoughts?
No, it's really not hard to argue against it at all. The objective facts that anybody can verify make that case quite well. Not knowing exactly what she said or what was discussed does make it a little bit difficult for me to address whatever points she might have brought up. But there have also been parents of victims at Columbine, at Sandy Hook, and at Parkland that have all at one time or another publicly spoken out and said it's not the guns that are the problem.
But an American journal, the American Journal publication, had conducted an extensive study, and they say definitively the more people who have guns, the more lives are taken. And guns are the biggest killer of children in the US now, above anything else: car accidents, drug abuse. Disease, and my goodness, we've seen a disease that's taken lives, haven't we, in the recent couple of years? So, you know, even despite that, of course you'll have people that speak out, and of course there will be people with mental health problems, and of course there will be other reasons, but more guns equals more deaths.
Well, number one, I'm completely unfamiliar with the criteria that they used in their extensive study that you're referencing, so I find it a little unfair to be asked to comment on it without being able to review the material first to see what they did and didn't look at or did or didn't include. What we do know from the FBI uniform crime reports is that roughly 80 to 85% of firearms-related homicides in any given year are criminals. Criminals that are shot by other criminals, police officers, or armed citizens defending themselves. Now, people may not like the idea, and they're certainly free to disagree with it, but most Americans don't lose a lot of sleep over the idea of predatory criminals being killed. No,
but I haven't seen the detailed study of what those circumstances were either, so it's difficult for me to comment on that. So we're both equal there. But look, here in the UK, we have a very different gun culture, although one of our other guests on the programme, Ian, is going to be telling us his history with that. But we had a terrible situation with a Dunblane shooting, and everybody was horrified. Gun laws changed. We haven't had a school shooting since. So regardless of the culture, regardless of the need for self-defence, regardless of anything else, if there isn't a gun in the hand of a criminal, if there isn't a gun in the hand of somebody, you know, that may be unstable, then the shootings are going to go down.
Well, number one, you can't just summarily say, regardless of culture, regardless of this, regardless of that, and dismiss those very relevant factors from the conversation. As you point out.
Why not? I mean, Canada, for instance, just over the border, they made a big change. They restricted the rules and their numbers have gone down. I mean, of course, actually, let me bring Ian in. Ian, you grew up, didn't you, in a home on a farm where having a gun was normal.
Yeah, at the age of 8 or 9, I was shooting an air rifle. A little bit older, I had a 12-bore shotgun, and it was used for hunting purposes. There were very few gun regulations at that time. We're talking about the 70s and 80s here. And then after Dunblane, as you say, Kate, new restrictions came in where you had to have proper licences for everything. You had to prove to the police that you had them locked away in a cabinet in your home. So, and as you say,
so
we have not had those kind of gun-related deaths that they have in America.
But also culturally for you, you grew up feeling it was familiar. what would you think now about the idea of a gun lying around?
Well, I think it's unthinkable for people to have guns lying around.
So Dan, I think what Ian has been talking to us about this morning, I just want to put it to you, is it is absolutely part of your culture to have that for self-defence. In America, it's part of the Constitution, although changes have been made, haven't they, to what sort of guns can be owned in later laws. But if the changes came in, if the restrictions were there would become a time when people would look back, potentially, and think, how did we ever have that?
No, I disagree, actually. In fact, the Department of Justice studied the prior 1994 to 2004, quote, assault weapons ban, which really, in practice, wasn't a ban at all. I bought my first AR-15 from a federally licensed dealer in 2003 while that law was in effect. They studied that law and found it had absolutely zero statistically measurable impact on violent crime. Now, to address the points that Ian raised, none of those points or requirements would ever be acceptable in America. Because we're not going to accept that we have to prove to the local law enforcement that they're locked up. The Supreme Court already ruled on that over a decade ago when they threw out Washington, D.C.'s law.
Dan, there's something quite interesting about that.
That's not going to happen.
Sorry, Dan, just to interrupt for a moment. You sound like a very responsible gun owner. I know, I think you've got children. I think your children have guns. They shoot as well. What seems very strange for us over here, because we have very different rules, is why you wouldn't want to embrace a stricter culture with regarding guns, because when you see a young man of 18 going out and killing 19 children, because on his 18th birthday he was able to buy 2 guns, killing 2 teachers as well, the devastation that causes, why you wouldn't, as a responsible gun owner, be reviled by that to the point where you go, I want there to be stricter control so people like me, like yourself, don't get tainted by the same brush just because I like using my guns and I use them responsibly. That doesn't make sense to me over here. It doesn't make sense to us that you wouldn't be keen to see stricter controls to stop this sort of thing happening.
Well, no, I mean, that's not 100% accurate. What I would support are things that
just one thing there. Let's talk about one thing. He's 18 years old. If the age for buying guns was moved to 21, which I think 72% of Americans do support, he wouldn't have been able to buy those guns. So we already know if the rules had changed, if there were stricter rules about the age, then he wouldn't have been able to buy those guns on his 18th birthday and go and commit this crime.
He wouldn't, let's be clear, he wouldn't have been able to buy them legally. That doesn't mean he wouldn't have been able to get his hands on a firearm.
Be less likely to, though. And the point is that in America, you can't buy an alcoholic drink at the age of 18, and yet you can own a shotgun. Tell me the logic of that.
They're 2 completely different subjects.
No, they're not.
Yes, they are.
But it's about responsibility, isn't it?
It's about trust and responsibility.
You can't answer that point. That's the problem.
So at 18, you can also volunteer to join the military and shoot anti-tank rockets and actual machine guns.
Under strict supervision.
In a very controlled environment and with very strict training.
With great guidance and with supervision from people who are going to train you how to use it properly, carefully, and in a way that's only going to sort of, be used in the way it was intended, rather than walking into a school and killing 19 children.
Well, I thought we were comparing things that weren't related, so I apologize.
Well, look, I mean, but the reality is, would you like to see the age range go up to 21 at least? Are you interested at all, Dan, in trying to have a conversation with the sort of the Contra rifle supporters in terms of trying to ameliorate the rules in some way to try and control at least some of these guns that are getting into the hands of the people that are causing this devastation?
I have been publicly on the record for years about this subject and being very open to having a legitimate conversation that is based on objective, verifiable fact, not emotional blackmail, lies, and just making things up. The problem is that we have political, quote, leaders like Joe Biden and Eric Swalwell and Chris Murphy that don't want to have a conversation. They want to lecture people like me and 100 million other American gun owners that if we don't agree with them, we're monsters.
I mean, other people saw that as an impassioned, emotional plea, not a lecture. Now, this week, the NRA is having its a gathering and a conference Donald Trump is going to speak at that conference. Donald Trump, somebody who I think was more akin to you on the views on gun regulation. His security service have said that no guns and indeed no knives and no weapons of any description should be allowed at that conference because to reduce and increase safety for Donald Trump. If it's good enough for Donald Trump to be kept safe with those kind of rules, why is it not good enough for the nation?
One correction, and then I'll expand. It is not a ban at the entire conference center. It is a ban in the room where he will be speaking, and that is not a decision that the NRA or even the building owner has any say over. That is a Secret Service policy that's been around for 30 or 40 years. So the Secret Service have made
an assessment that having guns in that room where Donald Trump is speaking is not safe. Why isn't that kind of scrutiny given to the ordinary people of the United States?
You're seriously comparing the most powerful man or former most powerful man in the world to a regular citizen?
I'm comparing their rights
if that's the case,
to have safety,
if it's a valid comparison, then that would mean that regular people like me would be entitled to a Secret Service detail.
I think what I'm saying is the right to be safe is why would you not look at that and think it's the value of life that's the same, isn't it?
My life and my children's lives are safer by virtue of the fact that we are armed and able to defend ourselves instead of having to depend on hoping that the police can arrive in time if there was ever an incident.
Well, Dan, I know we're going to lose the line to you in North Carolina. Unfortunately, the satellite's going to go down, so we're going to have to say goodbye. Appreciate you joining us this morning to put your case forward. I think, Miatta, it's constantly something that we will struggle with over here because... even back in the 70s when Ian was a young lad and lived on a farm and had guns, and I've got friends that are farmers or have guns, but they're very carefully locked. It just doesn't make sense. And it doesn't make sense that they wouldn't want to try and do something.
It feels really alien. I mean, I think I spent most of that with my mouth wide open. I can't understand it. And I think the thing is just the intransient. Like, even if you concede, fine, keep your guns, but put some rules around it so this doesn't happen.
And you're right.
Won't even
it's the idea, isn't it, Matt, of the fact that if you are a responsible owner, you wouldn't want, more rules in order to enjoy the sport that you have.
I just don't understand. I mean, every time there is a school shooting, I just don't understand why just the horror of that and the public outcry doesn't say...
Well, it's in the hands of the politicians, isn't it, frankly? We had Obama, we've got Biden. Every time there's one of these, they sort of wring their hands and say, oh, something should be done. You're the president. Do something about it. Put a bill to Congress and challenge the gun-supporting lobby to vote it down, and then people can see who these people are and vote them out of office.
It's incredibly emotive for us, certainly. Ian, Miatta, nice to have you with us this morning. Thank you.